According to Tom Bauer, he wraps up this chapter with, just as Harry delivered that condemnation,
an embargoed manuscript from a London publishing house has bypassed California's top legal teams entirely. Renowned royal biographers Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell have joined forces, dropping a devastating set of claims regarding Prince Harry's youngest daughter, Lilibet. This coordinated release has left the Duke of Sussex completely blindsided in Montecito. The private family narrative he fought to protect has just been upended, and his team has no way to stop the global launch. The London leaks. An embargoed manuscript from a major London publishing house bypassed California's top legal teams entirely at precisely midnight. A digital copy of the highly sensitive text was securely routed past the automated content filters of the Sussex legal network, arriving directly on the encrypted servers of an independent media monitoring firm. This was not a routine draft or a collection of speculative internet gossip. It was a meticulously researched, legally vetted biographical exposé co-authored by two of the most formidable investigative figures in royal journalism, Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell. The joint venture represents a massive, unprecedented alliance between two entirely different worlds of royal reporting. Bauer, a legendary former investigative journalist, is famous for his aggressive, fact-driven exposés that rely heavily on dense paper trails, court documents, and verified corporate ledgers. Lady Colin Campbell, operating from her historic estate in Sussex, possesses deep, lifelong connections to the inner sanctums of the British aristocracy, granting her unparalleled access to the private conversations of senior courtiers. By joining forces, the two authors constructed a devastating narrative surrounding Prince Harry's youngest daughter, Lilibet, that threatens to completely dismantle the public relations strategy cultivated by the California household. The immediate question sweeping through the publishing industry was how such an explosive manuscript could reach the final printing stage without triggering a massive wave of preemptive injunctions. For the past several years, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have famously maintained a highly aggressive legal posture, frequently suing media conglomerates and independent publishers to protect their private family domain. Yet, the authors deliberately structured their latest work to avoid the traditional traps of libel law. They didn't rely on anonymous internet rumors or abstract character assessments. They anchored their entire text to official public records, concrete dates, and verifiable administrative anomalies. The core focus of the opening chapter centers squarely on a series of highly unusual bureaucratic discrepancies discovered within the official birth registration files held by the General Register Office in the United Kingdom. Under strict British constitutional laws dating back to the Registration Act of 1836, any child born to a senior member of the peerage must have their birth formally notified to the Crown through specific standardized diplomatic channels, regardless of whether the birth takes place on British soil or abroad. Bauer and Lady C present a detailed timeline showing that the formal notification process for Lilibet deviated significantly from the mandatory protocols established for every other royal child in the modern line of succession. The tension across the palace administration spiked the moment the specific details of these registration anomalies began to leak to senior royal commentators. The book outlines a massive, behind-the-scenes, administrative struggle that occurred between the Sussex legal team in California and the Central Registry clerks in London during the summer of 2021. The authors claim to have unearthed a series of private, highly contentious email exchanges, proving that the palace's internal registry initially refused to log the child's birth under her official royal titles until specific legally witnessed secondary documentation was physically provided by the attending medical staff in Santa Barbara. This revelation immediately opened a fascinating institutional mystery that carries massive implications for the future of the royal hierarchy. The public had long been led to believe that the integration of the Sussex children into the official royal family tree was a seamless, purely administrative formality following the accession of King Charles. Bauer and Lady C's findings completely shatter that assumption, suggesting instead that a quiet, intense legal standoff has been raging behind closed doors for nearly 5 years. The authors imply that the child's official status within the family's legal framework is far more fragile than the public relations team in Montecito has ever been willing to admit. The mystery of how the authors obtained these highly restricted internal communications points directly to a quiet rebellion among the former palace staff. Bauer's research team spent months tracking down a group of disgruntled logistics managers and administrative secretaries who had worked for the royal household during the turbulent transition period of 2020. These individuals, who had previously been bound by strict non-disclosure agreements, found a legal loophole that allowed them to provide specific factual timelines to the authors without technically violating their employment contracts. They handed over a treasure trove of precise dates, metadata logs, and internal policy memos that provided the foundational skeleton for the book's most damaging chapters. As the first physical promotional copies of the book began rolling off the high-speed printing presses in the north of England, the scale of the impending media crisis became completely undeniable. The authors had successfully managed to keep the entire project completely hidden from the public eye for over 18 months, ensuring that the Sussex legal team would have absolutely no time to draft a coherent counter-strategy before the excerpts hit the global syndication networks. The lines had been drawn, the evidentiary paper trail was securely locked in the publisher's vaults, and a massive, highly coordinated strike against the California narrative was officially underway. Blindsided in Montecito, a heavy brass desk lamp illuminated an open laptop screen inside a private study in Montecito at precisely 2:15 in the morning. Prince Harry sat staring at an urgent email marked with a red high-priority flag. The message came directly from his lead public relations advisor based in Los Angeles. It contained a scanned 90-page excerpt from an embargoed manuscript scheduled for global release in less than 48 hours. The Duke of Sussex picked up his smartphone to dial his legal team, but his hand stopped mid-air as he read the opening paragraph of the text. He had genuinely believed these private family details were completely locked away from the public eye forever. The sudden panic inside the California mansion highlights the incredibly fragile nature of the Sussex communications strategy. Over the last few years, the couple has spent millions of pounds hiring top-tier security firms, international crisis managers, and aggressive reputation attorneys. Their goal was to maintain absolute control over the narrative surrounding their children, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. They strictly rationed photographs, avoided public school events, and limited family updates to highly curated press releases. Yet, this entire protective wall was completely bypassed by a traditional publishing house in Great Britain. The tension spiked instantly because the leaked manuscript did not target the couple's political ambitions or commercial Netflix ventures. Instead, it focused directly on the legal validation of Lilibet's position within the British line of succession. According to the excerpt, the book's authors had spent nearly 2 years interviewing former staff members from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. These individuals had managed the diplomatic paperwork for the family during their brief move to Canada in early 2020. The authors claimed to have found concrete proof that the standard verification protocols required for royal births abroad were never fully completed by the California legal representatives. This revelation immediately introduced a massive, high-stakes mystery into the heart of the Sussex household. The public had always assumed that the child's status as a British princess was a settled constitutional fact. After all, her name appeared clearly on the official royal family website, positioned directly behind her older brother. Why then would two of the most experienced biographers in the United Kingdom risk an immense libel lawsuit by claiming the documentation was incomplete? The explanation for this legal riddle involves an overlooked administrative requirement tied to the British Nationality Act of 1981. Under this specific legislation, children born outside the United Kingdom to a British citizen must have their birth certificate explicitly witnessed and verified by an authorized consular official within a strict 90-day window. Bauer's research team discovered that during the chaotic summer of 2021, the Sussex legal team missed this crucial deadline due to a filing error involving the California Health Department. The official consular verification was not actually processed until nearly 10 months later, creating a significant legal gap in the historical record. Harry's legal advisors spent the next 3 hours huddled over a secure conference call, desperately searching for a way to stop the publication. They immediately realized that a standard copyright claim would be completely useless in this scenario. The authors had not stolen any private letters or personal photographs. They had simply reconstructed a public timeline using official government logs obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. The legal team had to face the cold truth that they were completely powerless to stop the global launch of the book. With the initial mystery of the filing error thoroughly resolved, a far more dangerous question immediately opened up for the couple's plans. The manuscript contained a secondary chapter detailing a series of private letters exchanged between Harry and the late Queen Elizabeth II regarding the choice of the child's name. The biographers claimed that these letters proved the Queen was deeply uncomfortable with her highly private childhood nickname being used for a commercialized royal brand in the United States. This specific claim threatened to permanently destroy the narrative of family reconciliation that Harry had carefully presented in his own memoir. If the public came to believe that the late monarch felt manipulated by her grandson during her final years, the blow to the Sussex brand would be absolutely devastating. Harry stared at the glowing laptop screen, realizing that the upcoming week would require a complete overhaul of his media strategy. The biographers had successfully stolen the initiative, leaving the California team scrambling to defend their family's core legitimacy as the global printing presses began to turn. The disputed registry, a crisp stack of public document pull requests, arrived on a wooden table inside the General Register office in London at precisely 9:15 in the morning. Tom Bauer's lead genealogical researcher picked up the official birth data printouts, cross-referencing them immediately with historical ledger formats spanning the last 40 years. The text on the page was completely clear, yet it revealed a highly complex administrative puzzle. The document tracking the birth of Princess Lilibet showed a sequence of filing dates that completely contradicted the standardized, prompt registration timelines established for every other member of the core British royal family. The intense focus on these bureaucratic timelines highlights the unyielding framework governing the validation of the line of succession. While the global public often views the royal family through the glamorous lens of high-profile charity galas and public television appearances, the actual machinery of the crown is entirely dependent on rigid, dry legal technicalities. To maintain a legitimate claim to a royal title, a child's birth must pass through an extensive series of administrative checkpoints managed by the British Civil Service. If a single document contains an unverified signature, an incorrect time code, or an inconsistent naming layout, the entire institutional infrastructure is thrown into immediate confusion. The specific tension inside the Central Records database spiked because the biographers had discovered a deep, structural formatting discrepancy between Lilibet's birth tracking documents and those of her older brother. When Prince Archie was born, his legal paperwork was handled by the medical staff at the Portland Hospital in London, flowing automatically into the standard British registry system under the strict oversight of the Crown's personal registrars. For Lilibet's birth at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in California, the administrative path was entirely different. The authors present an exhaustive timeline proving that the American birth certificate used a completely different naming convention, sparking an immediate, multi-layered dispute over how the data should be formally logged in the United Kingdom's master inheritance books. This specific data gap immediately introduced an explosive, unresolved mystery to the core of the entire investigation. The public has spent years operating under the firm assumption that a royal child's birth registration is an automated, completely smooth process that cannot be altered or delayed by internal palace politics. Yet, the authors present concrete evidence of a protracted, behind-the-scenes standoff that took place between the Sussex Legal Counsel and the central government archivists during the autumn of 2021. Why would the highest recording officers in the country delay the formal synchronization of a royal birth register for nearly 10 months after the child arrived into the world? The explanation for this massive bureaucratic delay involves a highly technical clash between regional American recording laws and ancient British constitutional protocols. In the state of California, vital statistics records require parents to list their full legal names without incorporating foreign royal styles or honors unless they can produce an explicitly verified federal court order allowing the modification. On the initial document filed in Santa Barbara, the mother listed her identity simply as Rachel Meghan Markle, while the father was recorded as the Duke of Sussex, His Royal Highness. This asymmetric formatting immediately triggered a red flag within the London Registrar's office, as British Crown rules strictly dictate that both parents must be recorded with perfectly matching hereditary titles to allow an automatic, seamless transfer to the official civil list of the peerage. The Sussex legal team spent months arguing that the California filing layout should be accepted at face value by the London authorities without any further corroboration. They maintained that the unique, high-profile status of the family rendered additional medical verifications entirely redundant. However, the senior registrars in the United Kingdom refused to budge, dug in their heels, and insisted that the strict letters of the law had to be followed to the exact punctuation mark to prevent any dangerous historical precedents. They demanded that a secondary, legally witnessed declaration of birth form be physically signed by the attending California medical personnel and routed directly through the British consulate in Los Angeles before any permanent changes could be made to the Master Royal succession tree. With that specific structural mystery thoroughly unpacked and resolved by the author's paper trail, a far more dangerous institutional question immediately opened up for the palace administration. The manuscript explicitly asserts that while this intense legal argument was raging over the paperwork formats, a quiet directive was sent down from the highest offices of Buckingham Palace. The biographers claim to have unburied a confidential internal memo showing that the palace communications team was instructed to maintain a deliberate policy of strategic ambiguity on the official royal website, withholding the child's formal princess title from her online biography until the legal registry issues in London were completely cleared up by the independent civil servants. This hidden administrative freeze completely recontextualizes the public narrative of family tension that has dominated the international media for the last several years. It proves that the delay in granting the children their official prince and princess titles was not merely a case of personal pettiness or emotional fallout between family members. It was a cold, highly technical legal standoff driven by a broken paper trail and an absolute refusal by British civil service officials to bend the constitutional rules for a family living outside the country. The biographers have successfully front-loaded the hard facts of the registry dispute, leaving the public to realize that the drama in California was driven far more by administrative failure than personal choice. The broader operational panic deepened when the researchers examined the secondary ledger logs connected to the sovereign grant auditing committees. Every single child listed in the immediate line of succession automatically triggers a series of long-term budgetary projections within the Treasury Department, regardless of whether they currently reside within the United Kingdom. Because the registration documents for the California birth remained stuck in administrative limbo throughout the final months of 2021, the parliamentary oversight committees were forced to freeze the long-term asset allocations usually set aside for the monarch's grandchildren. This financial hold created an immediate, hidden friction between the Sussex finance managers and the senior accountants in London, adding a hidden layer of material stress to an already fractured relationship. As the text transitions into the winter files, the biographers document a series of increasingly sharp letters exchanged between third-party corporate lawyers hired by the Montecito household and the permanent secretary of the Home Office. The California team argued that the ongoing administrative delay was actively damaging their children's international security profile, making it difficult to coordinate official travel arrangements with foreign governments that require perfectly synchronized diplomatic passports. The Home Office remained completely unyielding, stating in a formal memo dated January 14th that security protocols were inextricably linked to verified civil registrations, and no exceptions would be carved out for individuals residing permanently in private overseas estates. The book details how this administrative wall forced the Sussex team to completely alter their legal approach. They realized that their high-powered corporate attorneys in Los Angeles, while experts in entertainment law and contract negotiations, lacked the specific, highly specialized knowledge required to navigate the ancient quirks of British peerage regulations. In a quiet, unannounced move, they were forced to retain a boutique firm of traditional constitutional solicitors based in the historic legal districts of London. These traditional lawyers spent weeks auditing the entire paper trail, eventually advising the couple that the registry clerks were operating completely within their statutory rights, and that the only path forward was total compliance with the requested consular verifications. This shift in legal strategy is where the true narrative of the blindsiding begins to take shape. Harry had been repeatedly assured by his domestic advisory team that the registration delay was a minor, temporary hurdle that would be resolved with a single executive phone call to his father's senior advisors. He was completely unaware that the civil servants running the General Register office operated entirely independently of the king's personal staff, meaning that no amount of royal pressure could force them to approve an incomplete document file. The discovery that his primary team had fundamentally misunderstood the mechanics of British administrative law left the Duke completely exposed when Bower and Lady C began unearthing the records. The final chapters of this section expose the ultimate institutional fallout of the registry dispute. When the final consular stamps were eventually secured in late 2022, the paperwork was technically complete, but the institutional trust between the family branches was entirely dead. The biographers demonstrate that the prolonged battle over the birth certificate had created a permanent, standardized template for how the palace bureaucracy would handle all future administrative requests from the California household. Every subsequent application for documentation, title updates, or travel clearances was subjected to the same exhaustive, unforgiving review process, ensuring that the Sussex team would remain permanently tangled in the very web of red tape they had attempted to bypass. Bower's text concludes this massive analytical chapter by placing the registry records side by side with the official public relations statements issued by the couple during the same calendar window. The contrast is absolutely stark. While the public messaging focused heavily on themes of modern independence and global media projects, the hidden internal reality was a continuous, exhausting battle against the dry, unyielding machinery of the British civil service. The biographers have effectively stripped away the polished veneer of the California brand, revealing a complex document-backed truth that changes the global understanding of the royal family's deepest internal divide. Lady C's inside track. A heavy silence filled the vaulted drawing room of a historic manor house in Sussex at exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Lady Colin Campbell sat across from two retired senior courtiers who had spent decades managing the private diaries of the extended royal family. On the low table between them lay a collection of handwritten letters, private diary excerpts, and calendar logs tracking the exact movement of palace officials during the summer of 2021. This private gathering of high society sources was providing the definitive, human pieces of the puzzle that Tom Bower's paper trail could not fully capture on its own. While Bower focused his immense investigative energy on the dry, public files of the registry offices, Lady C operated entirely within the hyper-exclusive networks of the British aristocracy. This social circle operates under a strict code of absolute discretion, rarely sharing its secrets with the mainstream press or corporate legal teams. However, the unprecedented nature of the Sussex split had created a profound sense of institutional anxiety among the old guard. They viewed the absolute modification of traditional naming protocols as a direct strike against the historical legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. They were entirely willing to open their private journals to an author they trusted implicitly. The core of Lady C's contribution to the manuscript centers on the precise sequence of events that occurred on the afternoon of June 4th, 2021. This was the exact day Princess Lilibet was born in California. The public narrative, pushed heavily by the Sussex communications team, claimed that Prince Harry had held a warm, deeply personal phone conversation with his grandmother before the birth. The press releases stated that he had explicitly requested her blessing to use her cherished childhood nickname, securing her enthusiastic approval before the medical staff filled out the hospital forms. The aristocratic sources interviewed by Lady C completely shatter this harmonious version of events. They present an incredibly detailed, hour-by-hour log of the Queen's private schedule at Windsor Castle during that specific weekend. The records show that the monarch was entirely isolated in her private apartments, dealing with severe physical discomfort and focusing her remaining energy on urgent state boxes forwarded by the Prime Minister's office. According to the personal testimony of the courtier on duty, the phone call from California did not arrive until after the child had already been born, and the initial press announcements were being finalized by the American public relations managers. This revelation immediately introduced an explosive internal mystery to the entire palace infrastructure. If the Queen had not given her explicit advance blessing for the use of the name, how did the Sussex team manage to announce the choice to the global media with such absolute confidence? The book outlines a massive, behind-the-scenes, communication breakdown that took place between the Queen's private secretary and the legal representatives in Los Angeles during the 48 hours following the birth. The palace staff found themselves entirely trapped by a fait accompli, realizing that publicly contradicting the couple's statement would trigger a devastating global media circus while the family was still mourning the passing of Prince Philip. The mystery of the palace's forced silence is resolved by a series of confidential letters exchanged between the king's senior advisors and the administrative board of the publishing house. The documents show that the palace inner circle was formally warned about the existence of these aristocratic diaries months before the book was scheduled to enter production. Rather than launching an aggressive legal defense or attempting to secure an injunction to protect the family's privacy, King Charles's chief of staff made a deliberate decision to maintain an absolute policy of non-intervention. The king realized that any active attempt to censor the biographers would only draw more global attention to the deeply sensitive details surrounding his mother's final months. With that internal mystery thoroughly unpacked, a far more dangerous question immediately opened up for the Sussex legal team. Lady C's research unburied a highly restricted legal memorandum currently circulating among top-tier intellectual property attorneys in London. The documents reveal that the California household had quietly attempted to trademark the name Lilibet across multiple international jurisdictions within days of the child's birth. They sought to lock down the exclusive commercial rights for clothing lines, multimedia production ventures, and digital lifestyle brands, effectively turning a private royal nickname into a corporate asset. This commercial strategy represents the true source of the intense resentment felt by the old guard of the British aristocracy. To the courtiers who had served the late Queen for decades, the transformation of her deeply personal family name into a trademarked lifestyle brand was an unforgivable breach of traditional royal dignity. They viewed it as a cynical monetization of a historical legacy that belonged to the entire nation, rather than a genuine tribute to a beloved grandmother. This profound sense of betrayal is what ultimately motivated these high society sources to break their traditional code of silence and hand over the documentation that blindsided the Montecito household. As the chapter transitions into the late summer logs, Lady C documents the precise moment the palace legal team realized the trademark applications had been filed in the United States. A formal, highly sensitive memo was routed directly to the Prince of Wales, outlining the long-term institutional risks of allowing a private royal moniker to be used for commercial entertainment projects. The legal team advised that while the Crown could not legally block a trademark application filed in a foreign country, they could strictly enforce royal licensing laws within the United Kingdom, ensuring that any commercial products bearing the name would be completely banned from entering the British market. This economic counter-strategy completely paralyzed the long-term financial plans developed by the Sussex media consultants. They realized that a global brand that could not legally operate or distribute products within the United Kingdom was practically worthless to major international retail partners. The discovery that the British legal system could entirely isolate their commercial projects left the California team in a highly vulnerable position, completely unable to monetize the specific family links they had fought so hard to establish. Lady C's narrative concludes this extensive chapter by looking directly at the permanent psychological rift this dispute caused within the immediate family. The detailed timelines and personal letters compiled in the text prove that the battle over the name was not a minor domestic disagreement that could be healed by time or private conversation. It was a calculated, document-backed institutional conflict that permanently altered how the core members of the royal family viewed the motives of the California household. The biographers successfully peeled back the layers of public relations imagery, leaving the global audience to confront a harsh, documented truth that changes the understanding of the royal succession forever. The ultimate royal precedent, a formal, bound volume of constitutional case law was delivered to the main desk of the Privy Council office in London at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning. Tom Bower's research team had tracked down a series of historic legal precedents that completely shifted the conversation from a petty family property dispute into a full-scale institutional crisis. The documents centered on the strict verification processes required for children born to the British peerage outside the territorial boundaries of the United Kingdom. These ancient regulations, which have governed the line of succession for centuries, were about to create an absolute bureaucratic nightmare for the Sussex legal advisors in California. The intense focus on these historical laws highlights the deep, unyielding framework that separates standard celebrity culture from the formal British monarchy. While a modern public relations team can easily issue statements declaring a child's title to the world, the actual constitutional reality is entirely dependent on statutes enacted by Parliament. Under long-standing peerage regulations, any individual claiming a spot in the official line of succession while residing abroad must submit to a rigorous independent validation process managed by high-ranking civil servants in London. If a single step in this mandatory chain of verification is overlooked or delayed, the child's formal legal standing within the state registry remains entirely unverified. The specific tension inside the constitutional archives spiked because the biographers had unearthed a series of overlooked legal requirements dating back to the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917. This historic legislation, originally designed to handle complex international title disputes during the First World War, established a strict precedent regarding the registration of royal descendants born outside the sovereign domain. The Act explicitly mandates that the Home Secretary must receive an independent, physically witnessed medical certificate directly from the attending doctors before any overseas birth can be officially entered into the parliamentary succession rolls. This specific legal hurdle immediately opened up an explosive, unresolved mystery for the California household. The public had spent years believing that the children's titles were completely secure under the standard letters patent issued by King George V in 1917. Those famous rules state that the grandchildren of any reigning monarch are automatically entitled to the styles of prince and princess. Why then would the biographers argue that Lilibet's formal standing was facing an unprecedented institutional challenge? The explanation for this massive constitutional riddle involves the critical legal distinction between holding a hereditary title and having that title formally recognized by the state for official administrative purposes. While Lilibet remains legally a princess under the letters patent, her lack of a synchronized, timely British civil birth registry means that her title cannot be used on official state documents, diplomatic passports, or parliamentary funding acts. The Sussex legal team had spent years focused entirely on the public relations aspect of the titles, completely failing to complete the deep, dry administrative paperwork required to weave the child into the actual fabric of British statutory law. The biographers detail how this technical failure triggered an immediate, silent panic within the Home Office during the final months of 2025. Senior civil servants realized that if a major international incident occurred involving the child's security profile while her official British civil registry remained incomplete, the government would have absolutely no legal framework to deploy state-funded royal protection assets abroad. The statutory guidelines were completely clear. State security resources are strictly bound to verified civil registrations, and the ministers could not bend the rules without facing an intense parliamentary inquiry into the misappropriation of public funds. This realization is where the true narrative of the blindsiding reaches its absolute peak. Prince Harry had spent years operating under the firm assumption that his family's security and status were entirely dependent on personal decisions made by his father, King Charles, or his brother, Prince William. He was completely blindsided by the discovery that the true obstacle to his children's institutional integration was a collection of independent, dry civil service regulations that sat entirely outside the personal control of the monarch. The biographers had successfully pulled back the curtain on the machinery of the state, proving that the California household was completely trapped by the very web of red tape they had attempted to leave behind in London. As the analytical chapter draws to a close, the authors outline the permanent long-term damage caused by this administrative oversight. While the public relations team in Montecito can continue to use the official titles for commercial entertainment projects and global media campaigns, the lack of a synchronized British registration creates a permanent, cold wall between the children and the formal operations of the Crown. They are effectively functioning as private American citizens with ceremonial foreign titles, completely isolated from the legal protections, institutional funding, and historical security frameworks that have preserved the core line of succession for generations. The biographers had successfully exposed the hard, document-backed truth, leaving the Sussex brand entirely exposed as the global launch of the book prepared to rewrite the history of the family split forever. The fallout from the pages. The final press releases from the London publishers confirmed that no last-minute injunctions would stop the global launch. Prince Harry and Meghan were forced to adapt to a completely rewritten public narrative. The biographers had successfully drawn a line in the sand, leaving the Sussex team scrambling for a defense strategy as the books hit the shelves. The legal injunction failed because the authors anchored their claims to existing public records, rendering any censorship attempts entirely obsolete. The physical reality of the book's launch became completely undeniable by Friday morning. Copies of the explosive biography occupied the front displays of major bookshops across London and New York. The meticulously tracked timelines and public record anomalies discovered by Tom Bower and Lady Colin Campbell were now a matter of global public discussion. The Sussex communications team in California remained entirely silent, their usual rapid response. Public relations strategy completely paralyzed by the sheer volume of verified document references laid out across the chapters. Behind closed doors in Montecito, the atmosphere was one of profound shock. Harry's legal advisors admitted that attempting a high-profile retraction campaign would only extend the shelf life of the book's most damaging chapters. The biographers had completely bypassed the couple's media barriers by avoiding speculative gossip and sticking strictly to official registry files and historical peerage laws. This strategic precision left the California household completely exposed, forcing them to watch the public narrative of their family legacy shift rapidly without any means of control. The ultimate significance of this publishing event is the permanent structural boundary it establishes within royal family history. It proves that despite the immense power of modern celebrity branding and international media deals, the ancient dry machinery of the British constitutional state remains entirely unyielding. The public relations facade had been stripped away by a paper trail, leaving the global audience to confront a harsh, documented truth that permanently alters the understanding of the Sussex split.